So realizing that we've already solved this problem together, now we're going to look at this in a different way. We used tape diagrams the first time we saw this. Now it asks us to set up a table with 4 columns and label those columns. So let's think about the things that we know here. We know that we have resource books in our library. We know that we have fiction books and nonfiction books. And from that, we could probably find a total number of books in the library. So let's go ahead and make a table here. This is another way to solve this type of problem, and you'll find it's going to be an easier way to solve the problem than making a ton of tape diagrams. So let's think about what we know. We know that there are 4 times as many fiction as nonfiction. Or sorry, 4 times as many fiction as resource. We know that from right here. 4 times as many fiction as resource. All right, well, let's think about that. That means if I have 2 resource books, I should have 4 times as many fiction. So what is 2 times 4? It's 8. So then we know there's half as many nonfiction as fiction. So if there's half as many nonfiction as fiction, what's half of 8? It's 4. So I can see the total number of books in my library would be 2 and 8 is 10. Add 4, there's 14 total books in my library. Let's try it with some different numbers. Let's try it with, let's say, 5 resource books. So if I have 5 resource books, I know that means I'm going to have, let's see, 10, no, there'll be 20 fiction books because it's 4 times as many, right? We get this by doing times 4 times 4. And if you think about it, well, we want to do half as many, right? So there'd be 10 here. If you think about it, you can also get from here to over here by multiplying by what? 2 times 2 would give us 4. Guess what? 5 times 2 would give us 10. So the total number of books, if we have 5 resource books, looks like it'd be 5 plus 20 is 25. Add 10 is 35. Let's try one more. Well, let's stop here and see what we can figure out. Okay. Well, this is what we know so far. We've already done this example a lot on the other page. We know we want to end up having 1,400 books, but we don't know how many of each there are. We're asked to figure that out. Well, let's pretend that this is R, right? R for resource books. If I wanted to find the fiction books, I would just have to do R times 4, right? There's 4 times as many. For nonfiction, I would just have to do R times 2, because it's only half as much as this column. So if you think about it, I can write these a lot easier. This one I know I can write as 4R, and this one I can write as 2R. And think about how we got those totals. What did we do? We added up all the columns. So here's the equation I can write. If I take R plus 4R plus 2R, that means resource plus 4 times the resource plus 2 times the resource. So here, this would represent my fiction books. This would represent my nonfiction books. If I add all those up, I get my total. I'll know my total amount. But I already know what that is. I know it's 1,400. So I can write R plus 4R plus 2R equals 1,400. Now, let's think about our do now. We can take this and make it a lot smaller, right? Technically, this right here means, when we think about it, it means 1R. So that means if I have R plus 4R, that's 5R. And then I can add 5R plus 2R. These are all the same variables, right? I can get 7R. And now this is a much easier equation to solve. Because now if I showed this to you right here, you'd say, oh, mister, that's a multiplication equation. All I have to do is divide. Your goal is to get that 7R to be just R. And so how could you do that? You could divide both sides of your equation by 7. We know our balance scale has to be balanced. So 7R divided by 7, that's just R. 1,400 divided by 7, I might have to do some figuring out there. I know 7 fits into 14 2 times exactly, and then life is pretty easy because 7 fits into 0 times, and then 7 fits into 0 again 0 times, and I'm done. So that tells me there's 200 resource books, right? So, but now think about what I can do here. I can say, oh, well, if I add another row to my table, technically, maybe I can try to cram this in here. Let's go ahead and ignore that we did that for a second. Put them up here, 4R and 2R. If I told you there were 200 resource books, which is what you just figured out, right? That would mean there would be there's 4 times as many here, right? 4R. So that would mean there's 800 fiction. That would mean that there are 400 nonfiction. Why is that? Because we said 4 times as many, 2 times as many, because it's half as much. And so now we can just we can kind of check our answer, right? If we're right, there should be 1,400. I know 200, 800, 400. Well, that's the same thing as 2 and 8, which is 10. And 10 and 4, 1,400. That shows us these answers must be correct. The biggest thing here is this equation. Technically, you could have done it in one step, but it's looking pretty good. Let's try one more together before I let you move on. Let's go ahead and turn the page to page 4, daily lesson number 2. So let's go ahead and read through this together. It says, Miss Allow wanted to add a new school sport, so she surveyed the students to determine which one was the most popular. Students were able to choose among trap shooting, football, lacrosse, or swimming. The same number of students chose lacrosse and swimming. Lacrosse is that sport where you have you kind of have this long stick with a net on it. It's a little bit like hockey and a little bit like soccer. And the number of students who chose trap shooting was double the number of students who chose lacrosse. Trap shooting is actually a really popular sport from where I'm from. It's where they throw this big clay disc out into a field, and you have to shoot it before it hits the ground with a shotgun. So let's already see if we can start to write down some of the things we know. Already I know lacrosse and swimming are equal. I know that because it says the same number of students chose lacrosse and swimming. What else do I know? I know trap shooting is double the students who chose lacrosse, is double lacrosse. Let's see what's next. Then we know the number of students who chose football was triple. So football is triple the students who chose swimming. And then we're told 434 students in the survey total. So 434 total surveyed. Okay, well, let's see if we can start to figure this out. It says to set up a table and label the columns to represent the above problem. So obviously I could probably say lacrosse and swimming. Lacrosse, swimming. But then I also know trap shooting. Ooh, I spelled shooting wrong. Try to do shotting. That wouldn't make sense. Shooting. And football. Then, of course, you add those all up, you'd have the total number of people surveyed. Well, let's try a couple amounts here and see what happens. Well, let's just say, let's keep it simple, right? Let's start with a really simple number in one of our columns. Let's start with, let's say 2 in lacrosse. And remember, since lacrosse and swimming are equal, that means there's 2 here as well. Now remember, there's double that number in trap shooting. So that would mean we'd have to have 4 here. And then we'd have to have triple that number, right? Triple this number. Football is triple swimming. So I'd have to take that times 3, I'd get 6. So 2 and 2 is 4. 4 and 4 is 8. 8 and 6, 14 total. Let's try another number because it wants us to make at least 3 rows. So let's do at least 3 rows. Save ourselves enough room. Let's try, let's say 10. When we know these two are always the same, we know this one is double that amount, so it must be 20. This one's triple amount, so it must be 30. So we have 10, 20, 20 and 20 is 40, 40 and 30 is 70. Let's keep going and see if we got the hang of this. Let's go back down. Let's try it for 5. So 5 lacrosse, 5 swimming. Again, these two are always the same because we found out, lacrosse and swimming are equal. They have the same number, okay? So let's see. We need to double it for trap shooting. So it'd be, yes, trap shooting is double. So I'm going to do 10. But then it's triple this amount for football. Not this amount, triple this amount. So it must be 15. 5 times 3 is 15. So let's find this out. 5 and 5 is 10. 10 and 10 is 20. And 20 and 15, that's 35. So we start to see some patterns start to show up. But remember, we want to have 434 students total. Well, we don't know what any of these are. We're going to have to figure them out. Let's try it. Well, we know lacrosse and swimming have to be the same. So let's just call them both X. They have to be the same. But then we know trap shooting is double lacrosse, right? So I can just do 2X. It's double lacrosse. And then football is different. It's triple swimming, so I can do 3X. And how do we find our totals? All we do is add this stuff up. X plus 2X plus 3X equals 434. And I know you're looking at that and you're kind of intimidated, but really it's pretty simple. All you do is you think, well, how many X's do I totally have? And I'm not talking about ex-girlfriends, right? X and X, that's 2X, right? Add 2 more X, that's 4X. Add 3, that's 7X. And you might be thinking, well, Mr. Schneider, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. I didn't change anything over here. All of this equals 7X. I didn't put something else on that side. It'd be like saying that if you have 4 quarters, you can get $1 single dollar. And that's true. You don't change anything. That's the same amount. That doesn't have a different amount. So let's keep going here. How can I solve this? My goal is to make X by itself, right? So I can do 7X divided by 7, but now I've done something, right? I've taken a step. So I have to do it to the other side. If I divide by 7, I got to divide by 7. So I might have to figure this out over here. Divide by 7. I ask myself, can 7 go into 4? No, but it can go into 43. It can go in 6 times because 7 times 6 is 42. Subtract with 1 left over. And now this is pretty straightforward. 7 goes into 14 2 times evenly. So obviously lacrosse and swimming must be 62. So that's what I can say. I know lacrosse is 62, right? 62. Swimming is 62. How do I figure these out? I just use my multipliers, right? So for this one, I would do 62 times 2. And that would tell me that there's 124 that want trap shooting. And I just got to do 62 times 3 to figure it out for football. And so I'd find out that it's 186. How can I check my answer? Well, it's pretty simple. Just add those 4 numbers up and see if you get 434. So let's try it. Well, we already know what 2 62s are worth. They're worth 124. But then I have this other 124. And then I have 186. So let's check and see. We should get 434 if we're correct. 4 and 4 is 8. 8 and 6 is 14. Then I know 2 and 2 is 4. Add 1 is 5. 5 and 8, that's 13. Ooh, things are looking good. 1, 2, 3, 4. We must be correct. So there we go. We've got our numbers filled out. We know how many students like each kind of sport. So now your goal is to go on to daily lesson number 3, and your goal is to try to complete this problem as best you can. When you do that, you're going to complete the problem. You're going to come show me the work you've done. And from there, I'll say, okay, you're approved. You can go ahead and watch the solution video to see how you did.